Hello all, you join me in the very early hours of the morning at Paddington Station on the Great Western Main Line, as I'm going to be doing a trip today which you most probably would not expect. And that trip is to be riding one of the Great Western Railway's Class 387s, all the way to Cardiff Central. Yes, you heard me right. So, let's get to the platform and see what we're in for. We are now inside the main concourse of the station, which as you can see is rather impressive, particularly the architecture of the roof, which has been with the station since its inception in 1854. Looking around as well, we can see a large variety of shops and restaurants, such as the Whistle Stop and Burger King. It should also be noted that Paddington Bear, the character created by Michael Bond for his storybooks, was named after this station, as reflected as well on one of GWR's intercity trains. Just opposite the main platforms, we can see the tube station to the Bakerloo and District and Circle lines, whereas to the right we can see the new Elizabeth line station, which is due to open later on during 2022, which is what will eventually replace the TfL rail brand, which operates out of the main platforms in the station to Heathrow and Reading. As I always do when I come to Paddington Station, I'm now on the footbridge to overlook the main station and admire its impressive architecture, as well as look at a few trains. So, in terms of who we're travelling with today, we're travelling with Great Western Railway, or GWR for short. GWR, formerly known as First Great Western, provides both intercity and commuter services out of London Paddington, as well as in the west of England, with our train today being a Class 387 Electrostar built by Bombardier Derby between 2015 and 2017. Normally, you would expect to travel to Cardiff Central using their fleet of intercity express trains, IETs, or otherwise known as the Class 800s or 802s, built by Hitachi between 2014 and 2018. However, this will not be the case for us today, as we will be travelling instead on one of GWR's Class 387 Electrostar trains. Now, you might be thinking, why would we be travelling on those? Is electrification enough? Aren't these commuter trains? Yes, these are GWR's commuter trains used for their electrified services in the Thames Valley. However, these trains are being used as capacity boosters on services to Cardiff Central for major events at the Millennial Stadium when the rugby's on. Except, this is not one of those instances. Since the December 2021 timetable change, GWR have launched a daily return service using the Class 387 Electrostars in order to maintain driver and crew knowledge for when the trains are used on these such events. As such, each weekday, the 7:12 departure from Paddington and the 9:41 return to Paddington from Cardiff is booked as a Class 387, whereas on weekends, this is the 12:13 out of Paddington and the 14:41 returning from Cardiff Central, after which the service will cease for the rest of the day and will return to IET operation. In passenger service, the 387s have only made it as far as Bristol Parkway to cover the shortfall of IETs over the summer period, so it'll be interesting to see them make their way across the Welsh border into the capital. Our train today is formed of 8 carriages, which is 2 Class 387 sets coupled together, and will be calling at the following stations: Reading, DIDCOT Parkway, Swindon, Bristol Parkway, Newport and Cardiff Central, with a scheduled arrival time of 9:15. As always, before we begin today's journey, it's time for us to have a quick walkthrough of the train and take a look around. Starting from the front of the train, we can see that the seating arrangement is 2+2 and also features tables, which is useful for long distance services such as the one I will be undertaking today. However, these trains were built primarily for commuter services in the Thames Valley, so it's good to see GWR being flexible when they need to be. We are now coming across the wheelchair accessible area, which also features the wheelchair accessible toilet as specified by PRM regulations, which I'll be looking into later on throughout the trip. Heading into the third carriage, we can see just how quiet the service is today, not just because of how early it is, but also because at the time there were Plan B restrictions in England, meaning that most people had to work from home. although these have now since been lifted. And now, coming into the final carriage, we can see a section which, on the Gatwick Express and Great Northern Electrostars, would be a first class section. This, however, is not present on the GWR Electrostars, as Thames Valley commuter services out of Paddington are standard class only. Walking towards the end of the 4-carriage train, we can see the interconnecting gangways, which, when operating in multiple, allow you to walk across the train, allowing for greater flexibility to find a seat. And speaking of which, it's now time for me to take mine and hit the Iron Road, so let's go!
Cardiff Central. The next station is Reading.
As can be seen outside, it's so early that it's not even at sunrise yet. So, whilst we pass Hayes and Harlington, I think now's a better time than ever to check out the train's features. I must admit that I was rather pleased with the train's legroom, which is much more spacious compared to the IETs. At the back of each seat, there's a foldable tray, which you can use to put down food as well as drinks, as can be indicated by the cup holder. Quite a nice feature for a commuter train if you ask me. Sadly, the seats on board are the Fainsa Sophia seats, which are known for being rather hard and uncomfortable, as can be seen from the seat test. Although each seat does have an armrest, which is a big plus for a long distance journey. There are also lights above each seat, just below the overhead luggage racks, which, whilst they are pretty useful, they can be quite difficult to reach at times. And with the first hint of daybreak, we are now approaching our first stop of Reading. Reading is a major interchange in Berkshire for services to the north, Oxfordshire, Surrey, as well as other GWR local commuter services. Reading was heavily rebuilt in 2014 as part of the modernisation of the Great Western Main Line, including electrification to places such as Cardiff. Unlike other members of the Electrostar family, the Class 387s are 110 mph capable, which, for an intercity service such as this, is great to see, as the journey time lost today is only around a couple of minutes. However, that being said, the service was rather rattly today, making it obvious that the trains aren't really used to running at high speeds, despite being 110 mph capable, so that was rather disappointing. This is weird because I'm on a 387, but leaving DIDCOT Parkway bound for Swindon and beyond is something I never thought a 387 would do years ago when they first entered passenger service. They did do this during the IET crisis, as previously mentioned, operating special services to Swindon and Bristol Parkway. But this is still pretty strange, even though they will be doing this daily. Well, that's it. Onwards to the West Country. Looking at some more features of the train, the 387s also feature coat hangers, which, as you can see, works pretty well on my bag, so that saves me having to store it elsewhere, like underneath my seat. As is standard with most of the Class 387s, you can find luggage spaces such as this throughout each carriage of the train. Plug sockets are also present next to each window seat. However, I was rather disappointed that there were no USB sockets, especially for a train that was built in the late 2010s. Route maps are also present above each door. However, I do believe these are now in need of updating, considering they don't take into account the fact that the 387s now serve Bristol Parkway, Swindon, as well as Cardiff Central. On the approach to Swindon, we can see the entrance to Swindon Cocklebury sidings, which is where the Class 387 fleet, having operated DIDCOT Parkway services, end up being stable for the night, or when not in use throughout the day, such as after a peak time service. Whilst I did say that they did not run beyond DIDCOT Parkway, the Class 387s do only visit Swindon for stabling and maintenance, and as such, 2021 was the first time that they ran beyond DIDCOT Parkway to Swindon and Bristol in passenger service. With that being said, we are now approaching our third stop of Swindon, and as such, it's only Bristol Parkway and Newport before we reach our final stop of Cardiff Central, so let's go. I know what you're thinking, and yes, this is clearly not Cardiff Central. Unfortunately, the train today has had to terminate at Bristol Parkway, owing to overhead line issues. Having had to wait an extra half hour to get my train into Cardiff, I later found out on my way home that the line issues were between Newport and Bristol Parkway on the southbound line, meaning if the 387 made it to Cardiff, it would not have been able to make the return, something which the 800s and the 802s have an advantage over the 387s, being bi-mode trains. Well, guess that means I'm going to have to wait an extra few days, maybe a week, I don't know how long, until I get the 387 to Wales.
2,000 years later.
Well, it's not exactly 2,000 years later, but it is significantly longer than I would have liked to do this ride again. So, I'm on board an 800 right now, on my way into Bristol Parkway. There have been various engineering works on the weekends, which are preventing me from getting out to do this ride. Until now, as this is now the first weekend that 387 operation between Cardiff and Bristol Parkway has now resumed. So, let's disembark and get ready for our service. Bristol Parkway itself serves the nearby Bristol Airport and is served by GWR intercity services as well as their regional services in the west of England. Cross Country also provides services between the north east and the northwest to the southwest of England, such as Exeter St David's and Penzance. And to finally make it to Wales, it will be a short journey on board the 387 today, taking just under 40 minutes, with 2 stops of Newport and then finally Cardiff Central. Again, we'll be in standard class. And we're now back on the 387 to continue our journey to Cardiff. Let's just hope we make it there this time. So, there's nothing really much else for me to do, as it's pretty much the same interior throughout. So, guess it's time for me to take my seat and hit the Iron Road. So let's go. We are now inside the Severn Tunnel, which is how trains operating Anglo-Welsh services are able to cross the River Severn, which borders between England and Wales. The Severn Tunnel was the cause of major problems on the electrification to Cardiff, as the electrification masts put up were rusting rather quickly owing to the damp nature of the tunnel. And that sign we just saw means that we have now officially crossed the border between England and Wales. So, that's it. Welcome to Wales, everybody. Guess there's nothing else to do but sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the trip. What we're about to pass now, shortly after the Severn Tunnel, is Severn Tunnel Junction railway station, which was built to serve the nearby Severn Tunnel for commuters into Cardiff as well as Bristol. Quite a convenient location if you ask me. And due to the journey being cut short last time, I think it's time we check out the toilets to see what they're like. Because I always check out the PRM toilet, I thought for a change I'd check out the standard toilet instead. And so, door locked, we can begin. Initial impressions, well, it is rather cramped, albeit it is very clean, which is good to see. So, it's time to test out the tap, I think. So, the soap's working out perfectly fine, so is the water. Unfortunately, it's one of those systems where you have to wait for the water to finish before you can use the dryer, which is rather disappointing, a flaw I found with most Electrostars. And the dryer seems to be working perfectly fine. So, with that, it's a thumbs up from me. It's now time to go back to my seat and enjoy the scenery of Wales. Crossing over the infamous Usk railway bridge and admiring the awe-inspiring views of the River Usk, we are now approaching our next stop of Newport. Newport is a major city in South Wales, and the railway station is the second busiest in the country as a whole. After Newport, we will then be arriving at our last and final stop, which is Cardiff Central. Our last stretch of the journey is over the Welsh portion of the South Wales Main Line, which runs from Bristol Parkway in the east to Swansea all the way in the west, which is a branch that diverges off the Great Western Main Line. The maximum speed here is normally 100 miles an hour, which the Electrostar is more than capable of doing. However, as I've mentioned previously, these things are really rattly at rather high speeds. Nevertheless, this is still my favourite part of the journey, as you are able to take in the amazing and gorgeous scenery that South Wales has to offer. And its journey's end as we are now on the approach to Cardiff Central. So, overall, what did I think of GWR's Class 387? Overall, I did find them to be a rather refreshing change to the IETs normally used on the route. However, I did find them to be rather rattly at over 100 miles an hour, which, for an intercity route, is not particularly great, especially as I paid £28 for my ticket, including railcard discount of a third. Saying that, however, the interiors are rather well suited to the route, not to mention that, with 110 mile an hour capability, the journey times aren't even that much slower, being only slower by a couple of minutes. So, that is great to see, and an efficient use of GWR stock, and taking full advantage of the electrification in place. So, that's it from me, and welcome to Cardiff Central.
We are now approaching Cardiff Central.
And that's it. Capital to capital on board a Class 387. Who would have thought? Certainly when they were built a few years ago, I never would have imagined that they would end up on services to Cardiff. So, it was definitely great to experience this. I hope you all enjoyed the video today. If you did, please help us out by giving it a like, as well sharing the video, as well as subscribing to the channel and enabling notifications, as I am now uploading new videos every 2 Fridays at 5 PM UK time. Well, that's it from me, guys. It's time for me to have a bit of a wander around the city, as I haven't been to Cardiff in a while, so it would be good to see what the city has to offer me this time before I head home. So, until then, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in 2 Fridays' time. Bye, guys.